I woke up that morning with a strange mix of excitement and nerves, the kind that makes your stomach twist, but in a soft, warm way. The sunlight was just starting to spill through the curtains, painting the room in gentle gold, and the house smelled faintly of coffee and morning dew. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of the floorboards as I shuffled to the closet. Today was her wedding day. My daughter, my little girl who used to clutch my hand walking to school, who insisted I braid her hair. Even when I was terrible at it, she was getting married that I ran my hand over the freshly polished shoes lined up neatly on the floor. There's something about the scent of polish and leather that instantly brings me back to mornings I used to spend getting her ready for school. The handkerchief tucked in my pocket felt soft between my fingers, a little comfort I carried, like a piece of home. I smiled at the thought of how she used to swipe it from my pocket just to make a game of waving it around before heading out. Packing my bag was slower than it needed to be. Every little thing felt weighted with memories. A tie I never thought I'd wear again, neatly folded, cufflinks that had seen more weddings than I could count, and a small perfume sample I had saved, thinking maybe today it would be the perfect touch. I paused, glancing at a stack of old family photos I'd placed on the dresser for no reason other than nostalgia. There she was, smiling with crooked baby teeth in one, sitting on my lap in another, and in the last one, she looked older, more composed, her hair pulled back like she was already stepping into adulthood. That I found myself tracing the edge of the calendar pinned to the wall, the one where I had circled the date months ago, almost like a countdown to this moment I had been dreaming about for years. It's funny, the way anticipation works. You think you know the joy you're about to feel, but nothing really prepares you for it. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the quiet hum of the morning fill the spaces in my mind, imagining the moment she would walk down the aisle. The dress, the way her eyes would glimmer, the little nervous laugh she always gave when she was excited or scared. Even as I smiled at the thought, there was a flicker of that anxious parent's worry, the one that never really leaves you. Is everything perfect? Did we remember to fix that crease in her dress? Are the flowers arranged just right? But beneath it all, there was this profound, simple pride. I had watched her grow from a tiny, fearless child into this woman standing on the edge of her new life, and I couldn't help but feel honored, privileged. Even I finished brushing my hair, feeling the rough bristles glide through strands that had seen years of laughter, tears, and sleepless nights. My eyes lingered on a photograph of the two of us laughing in the backyard when she was about 7. I let myself laugh quietly, a little breathless with nostalgia. Today was supposed to be one of the happiest days of our lives. I could almost taste the sweetness of it. Laughter, music, the smell of fresh flowers mingling with perfume, and the soft clink of glasses raised in celebration. And in that quiet morning, surrounded by small, ordinary things, the polished shoes, the handkerchief, the faint aroma of coffee, I felt the kind of anticipation that's almost tangible. My heart swelled with hope, ready to witness the moment that had been years in the making. Nothing could have prepared me for what was about to happen, but in this moment, I let myself bask in the joy I thought I had earned. The drive to the wedding should have been filled with music, laughter, maybe even a quick call to hear her voice. But the morning felt strangely quiet. I kept glancing at my phone, half expecting a cheerful text or a nervous, "Can't wait to see you," from her. Nothing, not even a drive safe. I tried to shake it off, telling myself she was busy, maybe talking to the planner, or just caught up in the flurry of last-minute details. But that little voice in my head refused to be silenced. As I merged onto the highway, I thought back to the last few weeks. There had been small moments, almost invisible, that I'd tried to ignore. Her curt answers when I called, the way she seemed to hang up before I could even ask how she was, the faint edge of impatience in her voice. I'd laughed it off, telling myself I was imagining things. But the seed of unease had been planted, and now it seemed to bloom in the quiet hum of my car engine, that I found myself replaying conversations over and over. "I'll text you later," she had said one night, and the text never came. "I'm fine," when I asked about the dress fittings, but her tone didn't match the words. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just wedding stress. But deep down, I felt that subtle shift, the one that makes you question every memory, every shared laugh, every hug you thought meant something. The smell of rain hit me suddenly as clouds gathered overhead, mingling with the faint aroma of old leather and coffee in the car. I flicked on the windshield wipers, the rhythmic swish somehow echoing the rhythm of my racing thoughts. Was I overthinking this? Maybe. But that gnawing feeling, the one that tells you something's off, was growing stronger with every mile. I stopped at a traffic light and glanced at my phone again, almost hoping to see her name flash across the screen. Nothing. And then, for a brief moment, I imagined her sitting there, phone in hand, deliberately ignoring me. My chest tightened, but I told myself it was ridiculous. She couldn't really, could she? A memory surfaced unbidden. It was a Sunday morning, years ago. She had insisted we bake pancakes together, flour everywhere, laughter spilling into every corner of the kitchen. I had felt this unshakable closeness, a bond that seemed invincible. And now, that memory felt fragile, like it could shatter at the first hint of distance. By the time I reached the outskirts of town, my excitement had dulled, replaced by a quiet worry. I tried to reason with myself, focusing on the small joys, the flowers she had chosen, the groom's smile, the way the sun would hit the venue just right. But underneath it all, a subtle tension had settled in my chest, a whisper that maybe, just maybe, something was wrong. I parked the car and sat there for a moment, hands gripping the wheel, staring at the familiar streets that led to her big day. The world moved on around me, cars rushing past, birds taking flight, but I felt frozen in a small bubble of apprehension. I wanted to believe it was nothing, that soon I'd be swept up in hugs, laughter, and tears of joy. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that the day might not be exactly as I imagined. The drive ended, and I found myself staring at the entrance of the venue, heart thudding in a way I can only describe as both excitement and a tiny, nagging dread. The building was beautiful, every corner carefully decorated, flowers spilling over in soft pastel cascades, sunlight catching the glass doors just so. I could hear faint laughter and chatter through the open doors, a melody of joy that should have lifted my spirits. But instead, it made me feel out of place. I parked and stepped out, the gravel crunching under my shoes, and the crisp scent of fresh-cut flowers mixed with the faint tang of catering in the air. I clutched my bag a little tighter, feeling the weight of expectation pressing on my shoulders. Every step toward the entrance felt slower than it should, as if my feet were remembering every childhood step we'd taken together, every promise of love and support I had made to her over the years. The closer I got, the more I noticed the subtle signs. Guests greeting each other warmly, embracing with laughter, while a few glanced at me briefly before turning away. My stomach twisted. Was it me? Did I imagine that flicker of hesitation in their eyes when they looked at me? The hall was buzzing with energy, music floating in soft waves from somewhere deeper inside, and yet I felt like a shadow on the periphery, almost like I didn't belong. I reached the edge of the crowd and paused, pretending to check my phone, hoping to spot her, to catch even a hint of the familiar spark in her eyes that had always told me everything was okay. But she wasn't there. And then, as if on cue, someone passed by, giving me a polite nod that felt distant. I forced a smile, telling myself it was nerves, that weddings were chaotic, that she'd be there any second. But the unease had taken root. Stubborn and insistent, I remembered the mornings of her adolescence, when she'd leave for school with a hurried hug, barely enough time to exchange words. I used to fret, wondering if I was doing enough, saying enough, being enough. Now, standing at this threshold, I realized those small fears had been whispers of a truth I hadn't wanted to hear. The warmth I expected, the pride I felt, the joy of seeing her, everything was tempered with a quiet, gnawing anxiety that something wasn't right. The floral arrangements caught my eye, delicate roses and peonies in soft blush tones. But, instead of delight, they made me hyper-aware of how meticulous everything was, how carefully orchestrated, and how excluding it all felt. I could see groups chatting, champagne flutes held like trophies, laughter spilling over in a way that should have drawn me in. But I felt a strange hesitancy, like an invisible barrier keeping me on the edges, not part of the tapestry of celebration today. Flashback struck suddenly. Her 8th birthday, a small gathering in our living room, balloons everywhere, her tiny hand gripping mine as she made a wish. How long ago did it feel? And now, The same hand that had once trusted me with her tiny fears and secrets was nowhere to be found, leaving me standing alone at the threshold of one of the most important moments of our lives. I took a slow, steadying breath and stepped forward, trying to remind myself, maybe it's nerves. Maybe she'll come running in a second, smile lighting up her face, and all this tension will dissolve. But deep inside, an almost imperceptible tremor of fear had started, and I couldn't shake it. Something in the air felt different, charged, expectant, and just slightly unwelcoming. And then she appeared, my daughter, walking toward me, but not with the warmth I had imagined. There was a stiffness in her posture, a tightness around her eyes, and the smile. Oh, the smile was nothing like the one I had been carrying in my mind all morning. It was polite, measured, and somehow distant. My chest tightened before I even heard the words. Sorry, she said. Her voice was calm, almost clinical, like reading from a script. You're not invited. Leave. For a moment, nothing registered. I felt frozen, my feet glued to the floor, eyes locked on her as if I might find a clue that this wasn't real. But it was. Every word landed with a weight I couldn't have anticipated, smashing through the fragile layer of hope I'd built up since dawn. My throat went dry. My hands, which had been holding my bag tightly, began to tremble. I wanted to speak, too. Ask why. To remind her of every scraped knee I had kissed better, every bedtime story I had read, every birthday candle I had lit. But the words wouldn't come. The hall seemed to blur around me. Laughter, music, the clinking of glasses, they all became distant, almost mocking. I could see flashes of her childhood, her tiny hands clutching mine, the way she used to run into my arms after school, the way her eyes sparkled with mischief when she thought she had outsmarted me. Those memories, once comforting, now felt like shards in my chest. How had it come to this? How could the little girl who trusted me implicitly, who leaned on me without hesitation, be the one telling me to leave on the most important day of her life? I tried to speak again, my voice caught somewhere between disbelief and pleading. Honey, I don't understand, but she didn't wait. She turned her back, walking away with the same confident stride I had taught her to carry through life, leaving me standing there, stunned at a flash of another memory hit me. The last time we had celebrated her accomplishments together, a high school graduation party filled with laughter and tears, the proud clink of champagne glasses. I had hugged her tight, whispered how proud I was, and promised I would always be there. And now, here I was, ignored, excluded, as if all those years of love meant nothing. That I stumbled back, the polished floor beneath my shoes suddenly unsteady. I felt the cold press of the air around me, the faint scent of roses now sharp and almost bitter. My heart ached, a deep, physical pain that made it hard to breathe. I wanted to understand, to make sense of it, but the truth was undeniable. She had chosen this, chosen to shut me out. That I turned slightly, seeing other guests glance at me, some with pity, some with confusion, and a few with polite avoidance. Their expressions only intensified the isolation, the raw sting of rejection. I swallowed hard, trying to push down the rising tide of disbelief, anger, and heartbreak. I had imagined this day in my mind countless times, filled with laughter, proud tears, and hugs. None of that existed now. Only this sharp, gnawing reality. As I walked toward the exit, each step felt heavier than the last. The polished shoes I had admired that morning now seemed like weights on my feet. Every sensory detail of the venue, the music, the laughter, the scent of flowers, felt like a cruel reminder of the life I had expected to share with her today. The child I had raised, loved, and guided had become a stranger in a moment. I found myself outside, the cool air hitting my face like a splash of reality. The laughter and music from inside the hall felt distant now, almost muffled, as if I were underwater. My chest ached with a mix of disbelief and grief. I sank onto the nearest bench, hands gripping my bag so tightly it was a wonder I hadn't crushed it. I stared at the pavement, watching rain droplets forming tiny rivers along the cracks, and tried to steady my shaking mind. That it was quiet here, save for the occasional rustle of leaves and the faint hum of a car passing by. I closed my eyes, letting memories surface uninvited. I saw her as a toddler, her tiny fingers gripping mine as we walked through a crowded park. I saw the way she had fallen asleep on my shoulder after a long day at school, trusting me completely, oblivious to the wider world. Each memory hit harder. Now, twisting in the pit of my stomach, a bittersweet reminder of the bond one thought unbreakable that I tried to piece together when things had gone wrong. Was it a single conversation, a single mistake? Or had it been the accumulation of years, small misunderstandings, unspoken words, moments I didn't realize would matter until it was too late? My inner voice screamed at me, "You must have done something." But another, quieter part of me whispered that maybe some things couldn't be explained, that sometimes people make choices that have nothing to do with the love you've given. The smell of wet asphalt mixed with the faint floral aroma drifting from the hall, an odd juxtaposition that made my heart tighten even more. I thought about the laughter I should have been hearing, the vows I should have witnessed, the tears of joy I should have shed. Instead, there was this hollow silence, the weight of absence pressing down on me. I kept my eyes on the gray pavement, imagining it swallowing me whole, taking away the confusion, the heartbreak, the raw ache of being pushed out by someone I loved more than life itself. That a flashback came unexpectedly. Her high school graduation, my hands on her shoulders as I whispered, "I'll always be proud of you." I had meant it with every fiber of my being. And yet, here I was, standing outside a wedding I had imagined celebrating, feeling invisible and unwanted. It was a punch to the gut, a betrayal that didn't need reason to sting. That I thought about reaching for my phone, maybe calling a friend or a sibling, someone who could reassure me, someone who could help make sense of the madness. But even that felt hollow. No words could erase this raw wound. No explanation could fill the empty space where her acceptance should have been. I sat there for what felt like hours, though in reality it was probably only minutes, staring at the rain streaking across the pavement, listening to the occasional honk of a car, feeling utterly alone. The cold pressed into my bones, but somehow, it was comforting, grounding me in reality. I let myself sink into it, allowing the pain to exist without trying to chase it away. For the first time, I allowed the truth to settle. I was rejected by my own child on one of the most significant days of her life, and there was nothing I could do to change it. And in that retreat, that forced solitude, I began to reflect, not just on the heartbreak, but on the years that led here, the love I had poured into her life, the moments that had defined us. They were still mine, still real, and even if she didn't acknowledge them today, they mattered. I just had to hold on to that for now. Sitting there on the damp bench, I couldn't stop the memories from washing over me. They came in fragments, uninvited but vivid, like old photographs pressed to the back of my eyelids. I saw her as a baby, chubby cheeks and tiny fists curling around my fingers. I remembered the nights I had stayed up rocking her when she cried, humming lullabies I barely knew the words to, just to see her calm down. Each memory was a heartbeat, a reminder of a bond that had once felt unbreakable. That I remembered the mornings of firsts. Her first day at school, her first recital, her first scraped knee. I had been there for all of it, a constant in a world that changed so quickly around her. I could feel the texture of her little hand in mine, the warmth of her cheek against my shoulder, the smell of her hair when she hugged me after a rough day. Those small moments had seemed ordinary then, but now, in the starkness of rejection, they felt monumental. One memory, in particular, cut sharper than the others. I saw her 7th birthday, the living room alive with balloons and laughter. She had insisted on making cupcakes herself, frosting smudged across her tiny fingers, her face lit up with pure joy. I had watched her with pride, helped her clean up, and felt that simple, unshakable connection between parent and child. And now, that child seemed unreachable, replaced by someone I didn't recognize, someone who could turn me away without hesitation. That I also remembered the difficult times, the arguments, the misunderstandings that I had thought we had moved past, the nights when words had been said in frustration, tears had been shed in anger. At the time, they felt devastating, but I had always assumed we would reconcile, that love would carry us through. And it had, until today. Those old tensions suddenly felt like harbingers, tiny cracks that I had ignored, now wide and undeniable. Another flashback hit me. The high school graduation party. The living room smelled of homemade cake, and I had clinked glasses with her, telling her how proud I was. She had smiled, hugged me tight, whispered, thank you, with all the sincerity of someone who trusted me completely. I had thought those moments would accumulate, building a lifetime of unshakable closeness. I had assumed we were on the same side, sharing the same history. But memories alone could not protect me from the present. Even now, as I replayed these moments in my mind, the sensory details clung to me. The soft cotton of her dress, the sticky sweetness of frosting on her fingers, the laughter that echoed off the walls, the faint scent of her shampoo lingering in the air. They were real, tangible, and yet utterly useless in the face of her rejection. And yet, I couldn't let go of them. Each memory was a thread, a proof of what had been, a testament to the love that had shaped both of us. I clutched at them as tightly as I had once clutched her hand, holding on to the past even as the present threatened to unravel everything I thought I knew about our relationship. By the time I left the bench, the sky had darkened, clouds thick with the promise of rain. Each step felt heavier, not just physically, but emotionally. The initial shock of her words had dulled, replaced by a gnawing ache that twisted into something sharper, anger. Not just at her, but at the situation, at the universe, at myself. Forever believing that love alone could guarantee a place in her life, that I found a quiet corner, leaning against a wall, hands pressed to my temples. I wanted to scream, to shake the air around me and demand answers, but there was no one to hear it. My mind raced with every possible scenario. Had I really done something wrong? Or had she just decided I wasn't welcome anymore? The unfairness of it burned. I could feel it like fire crawling up my chest, making my breath short, my fists clench. Images of our past flickered in my mind like a relentless slideshow. Birthday parties, school plays, late-night talks, bedtime stories, they all came back, each memory now tinged with bitter disbelief. How could someone I had raised, loved, and supported without hesitation become the very person who closed the door on me? The contrast was unbearable. I wanted to rage at her, at myself, at the world that seemed to allow such a cruel twist of fate. And yet, amidst the anger, there was grief. Grief for the moment I would never experience. The look on her face as she walked down the aisle, the pride, the tears, the joy. Grief for the loss of a version of our relationship that I had always assumed would exist, uninterrupted, unconditional. I realized the mourning wasn't just for today. It was for the accumulation of every small, unspoken hurt, every silence, every unshared word that had piled up into this final, crushing moment. I remembered her voice, calm and unyielding, telling me to leave. The way it had cut through my expectations, slicing into the heart of what I thought our bond meant. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it's temporary. Maybe she's just stressed. Maybe. But the maybes offered no comfort. Only a reminder that I had no control here, no power to mend what had been broken. The wet pavement reflected the dim light of street lamps, a mirror to the storm raging inside me. I kicked at a puddle, water splashing over my shoes, mirroring the turmoil I felt. Anger and grief intertwined, a relentless pulse in my chest, leaving me raw and exhausted. Tears threatened to spill, but I pushed them back, clinging to a fragile thread of composure. Even as the hurt threatened to consume me, a small, stubborn part of me began to recognize something else. That love isn't always about reciprocity. That grief and anger, while painful, were proof that I had truly cared, had truly invested. That didn't make the loss any less sharp, but it reminded me that my heart was capable of depth, of connection, even if the other side had chosen to close the door. That I stayed there for a long time, listening to the distant hum of the city, letting the storm of my emotions roll over me. I was broken, yes, but in the jagged edges of that pain, there was also clarity. I had loved deeply, and though it had been rejected, that love had not been wasted. After wandering for what felt like hours, I realized I needed someone, anyone to break through the isolation that had wrapped around me like a heavy cloak. I fumbled for my phone, fingers trembling, and called a friend I trusted. Just hearing a familiar voice on the other end felt like a lifeline thrown across the void of my despair. "Hey," I whispered, my voice raw, almost unrecognizable even. To myself, they listened, really listened. No interruptions, no reassurances I wasn't ready to hear, just quiet attention. And that simple act, being heard without judgment, was like a balm on the rawness inside me. I spilled the story, every word, every thought, every memory I had replayed 1,000 times since the confrontation. My voice wavered, catching on. The grief I had carried silently in the shadows. And as I spoke, I realized I wasn't alone. Someone else knew the weight I was carrying. Someone else could hold a piece of it for me, even if only temporarily. The conversation reminded me how fragile yet resilient we are. I allowed myself to cry, first quietly, then openly, letting the tears roll down without shame. The friend on the other end didn't offer platitudes or empty advice. They simply acknowledged the pain. And in that acknowledgement, I felt a shift, a small crack in the wall of numbness that had formed around my heart. Asterisk. I walked through the quiet streets afterward, the cool evening air mingling with the warmth of connection I had just felt. Even the streetlights seemed gentler now, casting pools of soft gold across the pavement, reflecting a tiny glimmer of hope. I thought about how easy it had been to retreat into silence earlier, how tempting it was to carry this grief alone. But reaching out reminded me that even in the deepest wounds, there is room for support, for empathy, for shared sorrow. Another memory surfaced unexpectedly, one that brought a bittersweet smile. I remembered late nights spent talking to a parent or friend, feeling safe in vulnerability, feeling heard without fear of judgment. It was the same comfort I had felt just now, a reminder that connection can exist even when the ones we love most turn away. That I realized something crucial. Seeking support doesn't diminish the pain or make the rejection any less sharp. It doesn't erase the hurt of being excluded by my daughter on her wedding day. But it does offer a lifeline, a reminder that we don't have to bear our suffering in isolation, that there are people willing to hold our fragments, to help us gather them when the pieces feel impossible to manage alone. That I stayed on the phone until my voice calmed, until the tightness in my chest loosened enough to take a full breath without wincing. Even as I hung up, I carried the warmth of that connection, a tiny ember against the cold sting of the day's betrayal. For the first time since stepping into the venue, I allowed myself to imagine moving forward, even if just a little, even if the path ahead remained uncertain. After the conversation ended, I found a quiet spot to sit, alone but no longer entirely isolated. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and distant flowers, a reminder that the world hadn't stopped, even though my heart felt shattered. I let myself breathe, letting the raw edges of anger and grief settle into something quieter, something I could hold without being consumed by it. That I thought about her. Not just the daughter who had shut me out today, but the little girl I had raised, the woman she had become. And I realized that love doesn't always guarantee acceptance, doesn't always ensure reciprocity. It had been hard to admit, but the truth was there. I couldn't control her choices, and I couldn't force her to honor the bond one had cherished for decades. That realization hurt more than anything else, but it was also strangely freeing. That I walked slowly along a tree-lined path, letting the sound of my own footsteps fill the silence. Each step felt deliberate, a small act of reclaiming myself from the chaos of the day. I reflected on the years of love, support, and guidance I had poured into her life, and despite the pain of rejection, I knew that love had been real, authentic, and meaningful. It existed outside of her approval, outside of her acknowledgement. And for the first time that day, that truth was enough. Memories continued to surface, but now I viewed them differently, not as proof of failure, but as treasures I could hold on to. The birthdays, the school plays, the quiet nights spent talking about dreams, they were mine, and they always would be. Her decision didn't erase those moments, nor did it diminish the depth of my care. In a strange, painful way, I felt gratitude for having loved so fully. Even if that love wasn't returned in the way I had hoped, I imagined a future where the wound of today would no longer sting as sharply. Perhaps one day, she would recognize the love she had once taken for granted, or perhaps she would not. Either way, I realized I could continue living fully, holding on to my memories, my pride, and my sense of self. Acceptance didn't mean forgetting or excusing. It meant acknowledging reality and choosing to move forward without bitterness consuming every step. The sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows and bathing the path in soft amber light. I paused and let the warmth touch my face, taking it as a small metaphor for hope. I could still find beauty, still find moments of peace, even if they existed alongside the ache of rejection. I had loved, lost, grieved, and now, slowly, I was learning to let that grief coexist with acceptance. That I took a deep, steadying breath, feeling the tension in my chest ease just slightly. I couldn't change what had happened, couldn't rewrite the story of this day, but I could choose how I carried it forward, holding on to the love, releasing the anger, and trusting that in time, even this wound could be a part of my growth, rather than just my pain. The evening had deepened into a quiet, almost sacred stillness. The world seemed to have slowed, and I found myself standing on a small hill overlooking the city lights, each one flickering like a reminder that life continued, indifferent to the heartbreak I carried. For the first time since this morning, I felt a strange sense of calm, fragile, yes, but real. That I thought about my daughter, about the choice she had made, and I realized something profound. Her rejection didn't define my worth. It didn't erase the years of love, the memories of laughter, the moments of shared trust. I had built a life filled with connection, empathy, and care. Even if she couldn't see it now, even if she couldn't meet me halfway, that truth remained. And holding on to that truth was a start toward healing. That I imagined what the coming days might be like. There would be grief, certainly, and reminders of this painful day, but there could also be growth. I could embrace my own life more fully, nurture relationships that had been quietly waiting, and honor the love I had given without letting it define my happiness. I could carry the memories without letting them weigh me down. The air was crisp, carrying hints of rain and earth, grounding me in the present. I breathed deeply, letting the coolness fill my lungs, letting it remind me that I was still here, still alive, still capable of feeling, of loving, of moving forward. I understood now that hope wasn't about forgetting or demanding reconciliation. It was about finding moments of peace, however small, amidst the chaos. That I pictured myself continuing to live fully, taking walks, reconnecting with friends, pursuing passions I had set aside, and cherishing the memories of my daughter without letting the absence define my days. I could acknowledge the pain and still choose life, still allow myself to find joy in other corners of the world. It wouldn't be immediate, and it wouldn't be simple, but it was possible, and maybe, someday, there would be a bridge back to her. Maybe she would come to understand what she had closed herself off from. Maybe not, but the point wasn't waiting for that. The point was reclaiming myself, reclaiming my love, and learning to live with both grace and resilience. That I turned back toward home. The city lights twinkled beneath me, and I let a small smile touch my face. I carried the weight of today with me, yes, but I also carried the strength to keep walking forward, to keep loving even when it hurt, and to trust that life, in all its unpredictability, still held moments of beauty waiting to be found.